And now, for more, we welcome from the United States, Benjamin Anthony, the CEO and co-founder of the Miriam Institute. Benjamin, thank you so much. There is so much on the go. Let's start with Hamas saying it won't be sending a delegation to this round of ceasefire talks set down for Doha on Thursday, but mediators plan to brief the terror group afterwards. So Yahya Sinwar seems to be calling the shots from somewhere in Gaza. Your take on the chances of a deal?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I think that the manner in which the negotiations is playing out in the media, and I don't mean this as direct criticism of any particular station or outlet at all, is very, very unfortunate. The Israeli negotiating team has been said to be seeking to release 33 hostages. Those are the female soldiers, the elderly, and those who are in need of medical or humanitarian assistance. What that essentially means is that the male hostages will not be coming home in the parameters of any upcoming deal, and that has to play and weigh deeply, deeply heavily on the heart, the emotions, the mindset of those family members of male hostages. I really think that getting into the ins and outs of the hostage deal is less than constructive at this time. I don't think that there's a deal to be immediately struck, unfortunately, and I would caution Israel's negotiating team to desist from leaking messages such as we're on the cusp of a hostage deal, the conditions have aligned for a hostage deal to come about. It's not helpful language, and quite frankly, I don't understand where all of these leaks have come into the Israeli modus operandi. We used to be a country, certainly in the case of the Mossad, that could keep secrets close to our chest. I think we should return to that.
Without even getting into the details of what may be discussed, just the fact that Hamas isn't there begs the question, how realistic is it to even be having these talks right now?
I don't think it is particularly realistic, and not because I don't want it to be so. Of course, everybody in Israel wants to see both prongs of the war aim achieved. They want to see the complete dismantling of Hamas as a terror army capable of threatening the citizens of the State of Israel now and in the future. And we, of course, desperately want to see the return of our hostages home to their families, those hostages being the male, the female, the elderly, the young, the infants, and, of course, those who are possessed of life, and those, of course, who are no longer alive. All of that is true. With that having been said, us wanting that does not mean that this monstrous evildoer, Sinwar in Gaza, is in a meeting of the minds with us and with the Israeli people. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. And I would, again, caution everybody to dismiss the narrative that is circulating inside Israel, which suggests that Prime Minister Netanyahu is somehow of a common position with Sinwar, namely that the Prime Minister of the State of Israel is deliberately seeking to prolong the suffering of Israel's hostages inside the Gaza Strip in order to preserve his political life. And that, of course, is rather similar to Sinwar, who most people estimate is seeking to prolong the suffering of the hostages in order to preserve his life in the most literal sense. That kind of comparison and attempted symmetry really is egregious in my sense. We have an enemy there who is a jihadist fundamentalist doing a deal on the only life insurance policy that he currently has, namely the hostages, is highly unlikely. And the responsibility for his mindset rests with his ideology and nobody else's.
Over and above all of that, Osama Hamdan, the senior Hamas official, has told AP they face difficulties even communicating with Yahya Sinwar, so certainly looks unlikely that there will be much progress in terms of getting Hamas input on whatever does transpire in Doha on Thursday. Benjamin, your thoughts, though, about Iran? And the suggestion is, by many, that Tehran is waiting to see what happens at these talks in Doha. And the supreme leader says something slightly different. It sounds like some kind of a hint that avoiding a strike on Israel would be a mistake. Apparently, he doesn't want to upset a higher power, so to speak. What do you make of the rhetoric out of Iran right now? It's more than 2 weeks that this waiting game has been going on since Iran said it wanted to avenge the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, a highly embarrassing target for Iran.
Yeah, so again, to be perfectly direct and blunt about it, this is more dross and rhetoric coming out of Iran. The Iranians have been allowed for far too long to trade on reputation as the neighborhood bully, the neighborhood aggressor. Back in April, when they launched their 300 munitions towards the state of Israel, they were shown to be that which they actually are, a paper tiger. A paper tiger, so long as they do not possess the nuclear weapons capability that they are so sedulously seeking. I don't think that Israel needs to be fearful of the Iranians. I don't think that Israelis need to be fearful of the Iranians in terms of there being a direct kinetic attack from Iran's sovereign territory toward Israel's sovereign territory. Not because there isn't malicious intent, but the ability of Iran to launch such a strike against Israel and Israelis is rather disconnected from the rhetoric. And I actually believe we're seeing a reduction of some of the rhetoric coming out from Iran. Now, Iran's proxies are an entirely different matter altogether. They are proximate to Israel. They are proximate to Israelis. They have the ability to rapidly launch their munitions from southern Lebanon. I'm talking about Hezbollah in this case, and then to move those munitions elsewhere. They are more difficult to detect, and there is less time to warn about incoming attacks by Hezbollah towards northern Israel. That's but one example. We also saw that the Houthis were able to fly a drone into Tel Aviv, directly striking an apartment block, killing one Israeli. That's the more serious threat. But I want to draw people's attention to the following calculation. Israel has a wider lame duck period in terms of American politics now than is traditionally the case. Traditionally, the lame duck presidential window is November to January. Because of Biden sitting out, we have from July until January. We need to operate against those proxies. Hamas, let's push on with that war, and then let's turn towards Hezbollah and defang these threats. I think it's vital that we do so.
Lame duck or not, what do you make of the U.S. presence in the Middle East, and how effective do you think it is proving as a deterrence to those proxies you've just been talking about?
Yeah, so I'd break that down in the following way, and thank you again for this question. The presence of the Americans in the region is unprecedented. I want everybody to be aware of that. There is an enormous force buildup of American military capabilities in our area, and it's not just a defensive capability. It's not just the air defense array that we saw so brilliantly operated in the response to Iran's attack on Israel in April. It's also offensive capabilities by way of the submarines that are now swimming about in the area. And all of that is important. All of it is welcomed. Also, particular aircrafts, F-22s, that are only in the possession of the Americans. Israel does not have those aircraft. So it's a very strong sign, but it comes with a cost. The cost is that with the increase from about a typical military presence of 4,000 US troops in the region, a tenfold increase, which is what the case is now, to 40,000 US troops in the region, comes with more leverage at the hands of the Americans to say to Israel, we've got our personnel in the area, we've got our hardware in the area, we've got our jets in the area, our submarines in the area. Therefore, our voice is to be listened to even more carefully than Israel, of course, would listen to an American voice under more calm circumstances. And one of the aspects of that I dislike is this artificial attachment of the hostage deal to whether or not Iran still intends to strike against Israel. I think that that's a completely false scenario that is propagated in the media simply to add pressure to the negotiating team and to the Prime Minister of the State of Israel to get the hostages released as soon as possible. I'm firmly of the view that the Prime Minister doesn't need any pressuring on that view, on that particular issue. I believe that he wants the hostages released home. I think that the military operations to rescue hostages in the past speak to his readiness to assume political risk in order to bring the hostages home. And I think that the team that is sent to Doha should hopefully meet with success, but I'm skeptical that it will do so.